Hey there, future celeb, and welcome to How to Be Famous with Whitney Uland, a safe space to admit that you want to be famous. I'm your host, Whitney Uland. Now, I'm a big believer that the world will be a better place when more good-hearted people are able to make a massive impact. And if fame is calling to you, then there's an audience for you, and I'm here to show you how to find it. In this show, we are diving into the art of becoming a self-made celebrity. And no, you don't need $1 million ad budget or a team of Hollywood agents. I'm all about making a positive impact, sharing your unique voices, and ultimately connecting like-minded souls who also want to make a massive impact. So, join me as we explore the stories, secrets, and strategies to help you leave your mark on this world. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and even entertained, because this process is really about turning your dreams into a reality and finding the audience that's obsessed with you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and together we will embark on the journey where I will show you how to be famous. Hello, future celeb, and welcome to another episode of How to Be Famous with Whitney Uland. I'm your host, Whitney Uland, and today I have a very special guest. She is near and dear to my heart, the one and only Nicole Benham. Nicole is I feel like you're a media mogul, honestly, a podcaster, founder of Beyond Media, and yeah, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you so much. I love that intro.
Yeah, well, so I always love to ask my guests, do you identify as a hero or a villain? And what is your hero/villain origin story?
I think I identify as both
Hell yeah. Okay.
because I think you're a hero to some and a villain to others, and you just can't escape that, right?
Yeah, especially with being famous.
Especially with being famous, which I'm not yet, but we're all on our way.
Well, I would argue you are famous.
In what sense, though?
Well, I think that you really know how to get people's attention, right? And like I always say, fame is just the resource of having people's attention, and I think you know how to capture that.
It's funny you say that because in some ways, yes, but in other ways, like you don't see me posting a lot on my own page. I think there's a lot of stuff that you teach that if I implemented would actually help me a lot more personally as a voice.
Yeah.
As opposed to everything else that I do, which is like curate, interview, throw events, etc.
Yeah.
So
okay, well, and I am so grateful for you and your friendship. Nicole is actually, I think you've introduced every guest I brought on this season. So
really?
to me, yeah.
That makes me so happy.
I think so. Well, Christian and Jorge, which like everyone loved those episodes.
Yeah.
But I just really think of you as like a super connector, and I want to get into more what you do. I'm curious though. Okay, well, wait. I don't think we got to. What's your origin story then?
Oh, right. So I actually used to be a red carpet reporter. So I was interviewing like Leonardo DiCaprio and so all these A-listers for Hollywood Reporter. So I was doing that, and it looked really fun and glamorous to everyone else, and it was cool. Like you get to go to the Oscars and the Golden Globes and all this stuff. And then very quickly I realized that on the outside it looked really cool, but I didn't get to have the conversations that I wanted to have with people. Like I wanted to interview people about their childhood or their divorce or their drug addiction or their last heartbreak or something where you could get significant insight and perspective. And on a red carpet, you just can't do that. They don't let you do that. And then I thought to myself, it would take me forever to work my way up at one of these outlets and start doing cover stories or getting good enough on camera to be able to interview these A-listers on like E, for example. It was so competitive. I was like, you know what? Let me just do my own thing. And who can I interview that I can get access to that has significant insight and perspective? So I just went after authors. And by the way, you see today that so many authors have the resource of fame.
Why do you think that is?
Because one, they have the celebrity energy that you talk about.
Yeah.
And they do have so much to teach. They know their talking points. They've written the book. They just, like, you look at Joe Dispenza. Remember when he was making the podcast rounds? He was on Lewis Howes, and then he was on Tom Bilyeu, and then he was on this podcast and that podcast, and every clip was going viral. Even though if you listen to all those podcasts, it's the same information over and over and over again. But he just stuck with it. He didn't give a shit what anyone said. He didn't care that there was backlash or people called him a quack or a fraud or whatever. And that's what you see with a lot of these authors that got famous.
Okay, I want to keep going on your origin story, but I'm curious with that because I was actually just talking to a client today, and she was like, I just feel like I'm repeating myself all the time. And I'm like, you should feel that way.
You should, yeah.
And I think
with this client specifically, she has a really important message, but it's very disruptive in the space that she's in, the field that she's in. And so I think that a lot of imposter syndrome comes in because what she's saying is so divisive. What are your thoughts on
I think
being divisive?
I think there's no fame without disruption.
Yeah.
I think there's no, if you don't go against the grain, you're never going to be famous. First of all, I'm very triggered by the word fame. I don't like it. I think it hints at narcissism. When I saw your video, and by the way, I found you.
Yeah, that's true.
Immediately, I saw the word famous, and my mind goes to the word narcissism. I just see all these people who flock to LA who are dying to be famous, who just want millions of followers, and who knows why they want it, you know? And then when I saw you talking, you're talking to people about, hey, if you have a message and you're a good person and you want to make an impact, here's how you get the resource of fame. So immediately I went from triggered to liking you because I was like, oh, this girl's trying to teach people how to use the resource of fame for something good, you know? And that resonated with me so much. And by the way, you can be famous for just being famous. It's not like I have a problem with that, but I'd rather the message get to people who are actually trying to make a difference because we need that.
Yes. Well, and it sounds like hearing different perspectives and elevating those voices is something that's really important to you.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so you thought I'll go after authors.
Yeah.
And so,
Oh, yeah.
And then bring them onto your podcast. Did you have your podcast at that point?
No, I started an outlet called Beyond the Interview.
Okay.
And so I started interviewing not just authors, but up and coming comics. I just started interviewing anyone that I thought I could get just a lot of insight from, a lot of good advice from. One of them was Andrew Schultz. He ended up becoming famous, which that's actually a fascinating story for you to look into. Do you know who he is?
Well, tell me. No.
Okay,
no, I know. Nicole is always like, you know this person. I'm like, no.
The guy who started this podcast studio that we're in, WTF Media, actually started with Andrew Schultz.
Really?
Yeah, that was his like big, I guess, break.
One of his, wow, interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, did you notice any kind of, I'd love to know, like when you were on red carpets, did you feel like you identified celebrity energy and like, so that then, like, what was your method for kind of like picking people and being like, this person has a unique perspective? Or was it just the perspective? Was there
on a red carpet?
Yeah, or like did you being on the red carpet impact how you were picking guests for your own?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because you could tell. That's why I went after comics, because they're so unafraid. They literally, most of them have celebrity energy because you cannot be a comic without getting rejected over and over and over again. Every comic has the same story.
Yeah.
You know? And also I noticed a lot of them struggled with mental health issues.
Interesting.
And so that was very interesting to me. And I would ask them about that. I would ask them about their struggles. They were very open. They already were all self-deprecating, so they weren't trying to hide everything. Whereas all of the other people were trying to, you know, put this image of perfection out there, which was so unrelatable.
Do you think it's the willingness to not hide your flaws that draws that attention to people?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Don't you?
I do. I just want you to hear you say it because you've met all the cool people.
Oh my God. I met like half of them.
Okay. So you started that, you're interviewing people. Then where do we go?
So after that, I was doing some other things. Like I was doing digital marketing and social media management. And then this app Clubhouse gets popular during the pandemic. And one of my friends, Daniel, has me get on it. And I get on it and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And I found a girl named Leah Lamar on Instagram. She had been in some type of Hanukkah skit with one of those late night, James Corden.
Oh, okay.
And like Zach Braff and Josh Peck.
Okay.
And she was so cute, and I looked at her comedy and she was so funny. And so I just hit her up, became friends with her, and I was like, hey, you should come on Clubhouse with me.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize. Okay, keep going. I know Leah, so I didn't realize this was how y'all.
Yeah. And so I bring her to Clubhouse. By the way, she ended up becoming the icon of Clubhouse. Like she was literally the icon of the app. Okay. And both of us became really popular. I was a really popular interviewer, and she was doing comedy shows on there. And I did comedy shows with her. Like she taught me how to produce, and we had Tim Dillon and all these big comics come on our show. So at the same time, I had made a connection with Chris Voss, former FBI hostage negotiator, who I'll tell you about. That's a really cool story. I brought him onto Clubhouse. And then I was exclusively hosting this show called FBI Negotiation Tactics. By the way, his book, Never Split the Difference, has over 40,000 Amazon reviews.
Whoa.
And he has a masterclass, the company masterclass on negotiation, which is like one of their top master classes. And so I exclusively host him on Clubhouse every single week. And we had Jared Leto coming to the show. We had we had people. People were at home.
Yeah.
And everybody wanted to learn how to negotiate. So we both got even more popular on that app. But the Chris Voss story is really interesting because he's my mentor. And we also work together. And everyone always asks me, how do you get a mentor like that?
Right.
Like that's the dream mentor for many people. And what I always tell people is if you want something from someone, don't approach with your hand out. Right? Never approach with your hand out.
Yeah.
If you give to someone, then the likelihood that they'll want to give to you increases by multiples. You've offered me a free session before. Why?
Well, because you give to me. Like that's the thing.
But do you see what I'm saying? And
100%.
People always say, "Oh, that's so manipulative." It's not manipulative. It's strategic. Both people get something out of it.
Right.
Manipulative implies that something bad is happening. It's not.
Right.
So anyway, when I found Chris Voss, I wanted to negotiate someone out of something and I didn't know how to do it and I wanted it to end amicably. And I'm not the type of person that's like, oh, let me get advice from a lawyer. I'm like, who's the #1 negotiator in the world? And I will hunt them down. That's the type of person I've always been.
That really is.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how you've seen me in action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I just don't care. I'll approach anyone. I'll talk to anyone.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'm really good at. And so I hit him up on Instagram and I'm like,
You just slide into his DMs?
yeah, but I was also like, what is he missing that I can help with? And I realized, you know what? He has the best-selling book. He has the master class. He's a legend. His social media is not reflective of who he is.
Ooh.
So I hit him up and I'm like, hey, your social media could be so much better. Look at Ray Dalio's page, another best-selling author. Look at Esther Perel's page, another best-selling author. Look at Adam Grant's page, another best-selling author. At one point, he messages me and he goes, you're not going to give up, are you? And I go, no, but not because I want your money. And he goes, okay, I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. And we had a call and I told him what I could do for him. And at the end, he goes, okay, and what is it exactly that you want? And I'm like, well, I have this situation. I need to negotiate this person out of a contract and all these things. And he goes, okay, I'll train you for 2 weeks. You help me for 2 weeks. Okay.
Wow.
So I got training. This guy is like $10,000 an hour. Okay. So he trains me for 2 weeks and it worked. And I became a better negotiator.
Wait, I didn't know that's how you became such a good negotiator.
That's part of it. And I'm still getting better because there's endless tips coming from his end. And I work with him closely, so I hear everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can't just go out there and be like, oh, I want, Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power guy, as my mentor. You have to make yourself useful to someone. Yeah. And eventually they just become your mentor because it's the proximity and they're helping you all the time. I could call Chris Voss if I get into a fight with my mom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that came from me being useful first.
And you really are like, okay, so those of y'all who have listened to the podcast where I talked about the Gary V, the VCon, Nicole, I'm pretty sure I name dropped you there as you invited me. When we were there, everyone knows you. You run, like, we're just walking and everyone, like, you literally knew everyone there.
Did I?
Yeah. Yeah, fully. And like and it was interesting because like we were there with Christian, right? And everyone knows him and everyone knows you, but they're different people and they're different types of knowing you.
Yeah. So
Christian has fans always coming up to him constantly, whereas you have like industry connects and like everyone on every stage knew you.
But do you see how both of those are so useful?
So useful.
And so when you combine that, you have an entire ecosystem.
Yes. And the two of y'all together are it's like scary to me how much power y'all
Really?
wield.
Thank you. That makes me feel so good.
No, it makes me feel good that y'all had dinner with me this weekend. I'm just like, oh my God. Has that always been your strategy? And I've seen it in real time, so I assume yes, but like everyone, it always seems like, and I've even met other people where then we end up realizing that they also know you. Everyone has the most glowing and positive things to say about you.
That makes me so happy. to
Yeah,
hear.
I've like never heard any I mean, I don't know what I would hear, but anytime people your name comes up, it's like, oh my God, she's amazing.
Oh my God, thank you for saying that. No, I wasn't always like this. To be honest, I think, and again, you know, bad things happen to all of us. One of my biggest heartbreaks was when I was about 18 years old and a girl I was best friends with for 13 years just stopped being my friend.
That's
And it was
so heartbreaking.
it's hard I'm sorry, it's harder than a guy
A
breakup.
100%.
I don't know. It's like your best friend. You have all these memories. It's like your co-rememberer,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So she stopped being my friend and then she got everyone else to like, I don't know, excommunicate me from the little community. And at the time it was the hardest thing I had ever been through, but it really forced me to learn how to make new friends. Cuz I'm Persian Jewish, so I was in like a small tight-knit community
Mm-hmm.
and it was all I ever knew.
Yeah.
So then I got into the real world
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, oh, I really need to like figure out how to make friends. And it's funny because a lot of people hear this word networking and they're like, oh, you're such a good networker. I'm not a good networker. Let's throw that word out. Networking, when I hear that word, I think of like people exchanging business cards at a conference.
100%.
That's so boring. Sorry. And by the way, if you just are interested, whether you're at interested in fun, whether you're at a conference or you're at a party, people are vibing and they will want to connect with you.
Yeah.
Think about our friend at Shopify,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
Hamza.
Mm-hmm.
We met him and we easily could have just been like, oh, you should meet so-and-so and you should do this and we should do this together. I think we spent most of the time talking about what he did at Shopify and all the cool stuff he was throwing.
He is actually fascinating.
No, he is. And so it would have been such a bad strategy to immediately go to someone like that and say, oh, hey, we're all doing this, this, and this, and this, and we all want sponsorships for
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to do. That's not the move.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And by the way, he's been so helpful just as a
Mhm.
friend in general. Stop thinking about networking and start thinking about being interested in other people and what lights them up. Because if you can engineer that, you can socially engineer that in somebody, and then you win. You know?
Yes.
That's it.
Well, and everyone loves to feel interesting, right? And like if you have a person come up to you that is genuinely interested, you're going to feel good. And also, most people in entertainment are inherently interesting. Like people in our industry, it's not like I feel like I've ever had to like I didn't have to pretend that I was interested in Hamza. I genuinely was like, he's a fascinating person.
That's how I felt.
Right. And
Yeah.
so, but I think to your point, you do have to kind of be in that mode of being like, let me be interested in that person and not just thinking about yourself.
Yeah, and also the other point about connecting people and including them. People have a deep need for a sense of belonging. That's partly the reason why people want to be famous. A lot of people who felt rejected have a deep need to be famous. Joe Rogan talks about it.
Mhm.
He felt that.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
felt that for sure.
A lot of us did.
100%.
And so if you consider that the need for belonging is so strong, then you can sort of cater to that. If you throw something, include someone in your event. If you're going somewhere, I went to VCon and I got tickets for like 7-8 people.
Yeah.
And most of us hung out the whole time.
Yeah.
And so everyone felt included.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and most people in that group are so willing to help each other and collaborate,
Mm-hmm.
but that's also socially engineered. It's not like I sit there and I'm strategizing. It's like part of my DNA to do that. And so you benefit so much when you include people in the things that you do. Whereas, you know, again, with this word networking, people are like, oh, we need to go to conferences and we need to do this. You can go to all the events that you want to go to, but if you're not interested in other people, nothing's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's going to happen. And the more cool shit you do and the more you know your role in this world and the impact that you want to have, other people will come on to help you with that. But if you don't really know what you're doing, like seriously, if you really don't know what you're doing on this earth and you're confused, it's fine. I've changed careers a million times. I'm sure you have too. But at the end of the day, you know in your soul what you care about, and you can create a mission, and it could be something that's other people's mission. I'm sure there's lots of people teaching people how to be influencers and how to be this. By the way, I was never attracted to any of them. You were the only one where I was like, I love this girl. That's it. Because
Thank you.
because you just had it, And so if people tap into what they really care about, for example, one of the things that I think I'm going to run with is pulling people away from politics, deconstructing the way that politics and algorithms get into people's brains and then pulling them away from that. Because at the end of the day, politics aside, everybody wants health, wealth, and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And a big indicator and a big factor in all of these things is our relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at politics and it's ruining relationships. Look at all these people who don't talk to their own family members anymore because they vote differently.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. We're literally letting algorithms, not celebrities as much as they used to, algorithms and politicians pull us apart from each other and tell us what to be triggered by.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And
it's also interesting, like, how that just has happened on such a bigger scale. And really, I think one of the most powerful things that the people in power can do is create divisiveness amongst the people, right? And then it's like, what is that famous quote of like, oh, if you get them to fight with each other, then they'll be too distracted to actually do anything.
Guess who wins? The media, the social media platforms, and the political commentators, and the celebrities who get paid.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Not you.
Yeah.
And so people putting so much focus on politics, I actually think if you want to be famous, move away from that. Unless you want to become like a hardcore right wing or hardcore left wing champion of these things, like just move away from that.
Interesting. I do want to come back though, because we were at Clubhouse.
Yeah.
I remember.
You're fascinated by Clubhouse?
Well, we got to go back because that's not we have to get to the Twitter of it all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you're on Clubhouse. You bring on Leah.
I bring on Leah. We kill it, whatever. As Clubhouse dies down, we discover NFTs. And I had made friends with a lot of investors that invested in crypto.
Can I be honest? I still don't understand what NFTs are. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, we could talk about that later. And to be honest, you don't need to right now. They're
okay,
not.
Cool.
They're not.
I'm past it.
Yeah, but we'll get to it later.
Okay, great.
So anyway, I moved to Twitter and I start building an audience there. So I had a friend who was living in an apartment, and then all of a sudden he's flying on private jets. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, what changed? And he goes, oh, you got to get on Twitter. You got to get into NFTs. And I was like, I'm in. You know what I mean? Say less. And so I get on and I learn about it. And to be honest, there was a really good mission behind NFTs too, because artists could get royalties every time their art got sold, not just the first time their art got sold, because there were these smart contracts. Baked in the smart contracts, there were recurring royalties. So anytime something got sold, the artist would automatically get a percentage of their art.
Very
so that was so cool. And I was like, oh, there's a good mission behind it and whatever.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know anything about blockchain technology at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't need to, because I went in there as a journalist. I was like, oh, let me interview all these artists and, people who are starting chains and all that. And so I got big on there. And at one point, and again, no one really knows about this except for the people that were in crypto at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I was involved in this NFT project, and it ended up blowing up in my face. I got accused of pump and dumping, which means I pumped the price of an NFT, and then I dumped everything. Yes,
you pulled a Martha Stewart.
Apparently. And so that actually wasn't the story, but the story sounded so fake that I couldn't even bring myself to type it up. But while this was happening and I was just getting, attacked online, one of my podcast sponsors, a big crypto company, the president reached out to me and said, hey, are you going to make a statement about this? And I was so terrified. I was so scared. And the first thing that I could think of under this much pressure was a sentence that ended up becoming a meme, which was, mistakes were made in a wallet I controlled. And so that was part of my apology at the time, that I wouldn't say forced, I was encouraged to write. And there's some important things that people need to learn from this.
Yeah.
One, companies don't care about you. They care about saving their own ass. So before you make any decisions because of recommendations that anyone else makes, talk to people in your corner and talk to a lawyer. Because what was I really apologizing for? I brought more attention to something that not enough people knew about. And then I got accused of doing something that I didn't do. And everything I said after that just sounded like an excuse. So I disappeared for 2 weeks. Okay. And I could have just disappeared completely off the internet forever after that, because it felt so bad to be accused in that way, to be made fun of in that way. But at some point, I think no matter who you are, when you're making money and you're doing things, people are going to call you a scammer. People are going to call you a grifter if you're selling courses, if you're selling your time. And you're going to have to learn how to deal with that and how to navigate that. And after 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, am I going to let this kill me, or am I just going to be a cockroach? I mean, you can't kill a cockroach. And I was like, I'd rather be a cockroach. I just rather, I mean, not literally, but I was just like, I'm going to just use this as fuel.
Yeah.
And at the time I called my lawyer, Matt Belinsky, quite the personality. And I was really upset. And he goes, Nicole, why don't you read me the names of the people that are making fun of you online? He goes, just read me their names. Read me their names on Twitter. And I go, okay. 0x pick. Panda 434. Zach XBT.
Yeah. And
yeah, there's people behind those names, but they're pretty anonymous. And their entire identity revolves around shitting on people.
Yes. I've also found, I don't know if this is as much of the culture on Twitter, but for me, most of my trolls on Instagram are also following me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so everybody has that. I mean, you talk to anybody with a big following and you realize that they're just dealing with it better than everyone else.
Yeah.
There was a moment where I took all that so personally, and I'm like, oh my God, everyone thinks I'm a scammer and everyone thinks I'm this. Yeah. Maybe 100,000 people on the internet heard but didn't make up their mind. And some of them, I'm sure some of them still think that.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? It's funny. I interviewed Logan Paul after this NFT project, Crypto Zoo.
Okay.
And I told him and his manager, I'm like, I'm going to ask you about it on the Twitter space. I have to. Otherwise, it just makes me look bad. And they're like, okay, yeah, well, we have no problem answering it. And after I did that interview, everyone's like, Logan's done. He's never going to make money again. Nobody trusts him. He's a scammer. And then he started Prime, and I'm pretty sure it's worth over $1 billion now. So I just don't, I'm not buying this shit anymore.
Yeah.
Don't think that people on the internet determine your future. They don't.
Yeah.
Most people are, I mean, we're all pretty much being programmed to be reactive.
Yeah.
You're winning if you're not. If you can move past the urge to be reactive, and that's why I bring up politics the way that I do, because a lot of political talking points have seeped into people's minds. You see that some people are triggered by pronouns. Now they're like, oh, look, pronouns in bio. And it's just like, dude, if you just let that go, you can focus on something meaningful. Or they get triggered, I mean, by anything really. Men and women are programmed to hate each other now.
Yeah.
You see a lot of that.
Yeah.
You see girls that are like, we're going to withhold from having sex now since Trump won. And it's like, okay, like, good. You should have standards. You should do that. You should have always done that. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just be sleeping around with everybody. So again, I'm not here to make fun of anyone. I'm just here to bring light to the ridiculousness that comes from letting yourself be programmed by the internet instead of actually figuring out what your goals are. That's why I love what you do. You know what I mean? what do you want to be known for? What is your message? And how are you going to not give a fuck in putting that message out in the world? Because you're going to get backlash. You're going against the grain.
Totally. Well, and I think for me it was, taking a step back, because it's like we don't even realize how programmed we are by the Matrix or the system or whatever. And so sometimes I'm working with clients and they feel like they're like, why can't I pop off? Why isn't this, resonating? And I'm like, because you kind of just copied and pasted what you're seeing everyone else do. Like these aren't really like original thoughts. You're just kind of like saying what everyone else is saying, and instead of creating the zeitgeist, you're just following it. But I think it takes, to your point, like being, what? That's actually funny. You're now the second person to say to be like the cockroach.
Really?
On my podcast.
Who else said it?
My stylist, Morgan Bienvenue. Yeah, she just said that was like how she got her career, where she was just like, I just was like a cockroach and I just wouldn't let anyone stop me down, and just kept going.
Oh, yeah. When I met Andrew Schultz, who now has, he sold out Madison Square Garden. He has a special on Netflix. I mean, killing it. Every single network rejected him. He's like, I remember him pacing around at the Improv right here in LA. And we sat down and he was like, every single network passed on me. Netflix, HBO, Comedy Central. And now everyone would die to work with this guy. I mean, he's he's one of the biggest comedians in the world. He said, fans choose people. The industry doesn't choose people. So even, by the way, even if you have people who don't like you, even if you have people who hate you or haters or whatever, as long as you still have people that are fans, which, by the way, they'll fight those haters and then your engagement will go up.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, there's really no downside to it.
Well, I also love what you said at the very top of that, because you were just like, the people who were involved in the crypto space at that exact moment in time, right? Like, I think so many people do feel like it's like the whole world turned against me.
That's how I felt.
Right? And it's like, no, this is like the smallest like subset of people that you could possibly like, I mean, depending on where you're at, right? But like for the most part, most people can evolve and maybe create a different audience, or people forget or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I think that, and it's interesting, like I'm curious, what are your thoughts on like cancel culture in general? Like, do you think that it's changing and shifting, or?
I think there's no such thing. Okay, cancel culture itself exists, but I think there's no such thing as being canceled unless you're in Hollywood and there was some kind of sexual misconduct or some type of abuse that makes people never want to hire you again.
Interesting.
Or like blatant anti-Semitism or blatant something that makes the people who make the decisions in Hollywood not hire you again. Let me give you an example of this. Russell Brand had some allegations come out, but he had already pivoted to like right-wing independent media before that. So by the time it happened, there were no industry heads that could be like, hey, we're not putting you in movies anymore. There were no casting directors who could be like, hey, we're not hiring you anymore. He was already out of that industry. But if he had stayed there, I guarantee you he would have never seen work again. He built his audience on his own. He owns his audience. They religiously listen to his podcast. And here's another thing he started. Once you start talking about things, it doesn't matter if other people already believe in them, but he started talking about God and the Bible. Very popular. I know one of the girls who started the Girls Gone Bible podcast. Very popular. They're famous. They go on tour. So again, Russell Brand pivoted and chose a different path that nobody else could just pluck him out of.
Do you think that was a strategic business move, or do you think he went to an audience that was more aligned with what was actually true for him?
I'm not sure, but I think we have to look at the timeline. Maybe at some point he noticed the Me Too movement was happening, and he just thought to himself, like,
I'm gonna dip.
Damn, I need to go be with these people. I have no idea how it went, but the reality is that the right-wing side is a little more forgiving with these types of things because they are inherently cancel culture, which isn't necessary. I don't know. It's not necessarily a good or bad thing, and it's a case by case thing, to be honest. Because again, I do think there's some people whose messages and their existence, like Diddy, is harmful, and I don't think they should have a platform or whatever.
I think it's interesting too. One of my friends was saying that he feels like anyone who works in finance, like their unforgivable sin is like fraud, embezzlement, like anything money, where like they lose trust over their money. Whereas for someone in entertainment, as soon as you lose trust in like your ability to like be a safe consciousness around, then that's when people stop trusting you. So like someone in politics could do the exact same thing sexually, have the same sexual misconducts, and they would be forgiven, whereas an artist wouldn't. And an artist could commit fraud and no one would give a shit. Yeah. Because that's not like what they're being trusted for. Yeah. So that was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there were all these allegations against Andrew Huberman, which I have no idea. The guy seems like a nice guy. He has really good health advice, but a lot of people, it was like a takedown article of women he had dated coming forward and saying all these things, which again, I don't remember. And I read it. I don't remember it.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, he gives us health advice. He's not a relationship coach. So
interesting.
Next.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the cancel thing is really interesting.
I also think it's interesting, like, Ellen DeGeneres, she like had marketed herself as being like a nice person.
Oh my God.
And so because of that, she had like given herself further to fall, right? It's like, because if she hadn't branded herself as a nice comedian, she probably wouldn't have gotten work since she's a lesbian in that time. And so I think it was like very smart. But I think if she had just been like, I'm a comedian, no one would have expected her to be nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so then when everything came out, I don't think that anyone would have been that like shocked to, like, her behaviors compared to a lot of like stars and producers are not that different.
Yeah, no, it's
but
true.
because she had built her reputation around that. And so I even just think for myself, that's something I'm always like trying to be cognizant of, because like obviously I have a mission that I believe is a really good mission, and like I want to be known as someone who's making a positive impact. But I feel like if I try and hide my flaws or something, then as soon as something comes out,
Absolutely.
like it's like I've got to tell you first, right? And like,
no, then that's true.
Yeah.
You should do that.
Yeah.
There's a guy, and I'm not going to name names because he's a A-lister, and he said to me, my public persona is an asshole on purpose, because no one's going to come after me for the Me Too stuff. He's like, it's always the people that act holier than thou that they come for, and I'll never do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn.
Right. 100%. Well, and I feel like the best advice if someone like, and to your point about like getting triggered or being reactive, is anytime that I get like hate or whatever, I notice I'm only triggered if there's a part of me that believes it.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
A part of me.
Yeah.
And I had a mentor once who was like, you haven't made it until people are calling you a scammer. Like that's when
that's what they call you. Yeah.
Right? But I think that some of the best advice that I got was like to just own it first. Like as soon as someone calls you out, just be like, yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
And like and a lot of the time that not owning it and hiding your flaws or whatever, that's usually what actually pushes people away.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think another thing that I know we've both dealt with, but it's such a prevalent emotion that Brene Brown writes about it, is shame.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of us were raised in environments where we were shamed over things that we just shouldn't have. So our natural reaction to certain things becomes shame, and then we have fear to do things because we're so afraid of that feeling. We don't want it to come up at all.
Yeah.
And so, unlearning some of these things, I think, is necessary.
Unlearning them, and for those of y'all that are, have been listening for a while, processing those emotions, processing the shame, because otherwise it's just going to stay there.
Yeah.
Do you have advice before? I feel like we're probably about out of time, but I would love to hear if you have advice for anyone who's listening who's wanting to build a network. I know you shared to like give value. You also have had a lot of, like all of us, right, different iterations of your career, and it seems like you haven't been afraid to make the next smart business decision instead of just being like stubborn about what you're going to do or where you're going to go. But I'm just curious if you have any advice for people as they're building their own networks and their own empires as well.
Yeah, I think to build an empire, you need other people, and you also need to be invested in what they're doing. So not just interested, but straight up invested. And if you can help people, help them, because it'll come back to you a millionfold. And another thing that I think is really helpful is treat people as they want to be seen, not as they are.
Ooh.
For example, and I'm just going to give, this is anybody. Like, if I introduce you to someone, Whitney, I'm not going to be like, oh, this is my friend Whitney. She's trying to build a community. I'm like, no, this is the girl when it comes to fame.
Yeah.
Like, if you need any help with celebrity energy or followers or anything, this is the girl you go to.
Yeah.
Number one girl. Like, that's it. I'm always going to do that.
You're so good at that. And I also, I feel like for those of y'all who've been listening for a long time, you know that I've talked about my tarot reader, Veronica. Veronica told me about you.
What did she say?
Did I tell you about this?
Yeah, you did, but I
tarot
want to hear it
reader.
again.
Yeah, I did a reading. It was like right before you and I met. I think we actually had our meeting on the calendar, but it hadn't happened yet. And she was just like, there's this fire sign that's about to come into your life who's like gonna really help in your career. And like, it's gonna really, she said, I remember sing your praises was like the phrase that she used. And I was like, interesting. And like, I had no idea what it was. And then later when I found out that you're a fire sign, I was like, oh, yep, there, that makes sense.
That makes me so happy. By the way, I just want to say for people who are listening that this doesn't only work with, you know, people who are aspiring. This work, like, there was a guy, I'm not going to name names, but he's a billionaire investor. And he's an author, and he writes a lot on Threads and Twitter and all that. I was talking to him about the things that he writes, and I said, you know, there's this other author that writes things that are similar to yours. You know, you guys kind of remind me of each other. And he, from a place of ego, says to me, yeah, but, you know, everything I write is timeless. It'll be true 10 years from now, 100 years from now, etc. And instead of me judging that statement, I just thought to myself, okay, that's how he wants to be seen. So next time he invited me somewhere in front of other people, I said, well, you know, his stuff is timeless. It'll be true 10 years from now, 100. I literally repeated what he said to me about him in front of other people, because that gave me a clue when he said it, that that's how he wants to be seen. So I said it. And by the way, after that event, he invited me to so many more.
Yeah.
And you can imagine the types of people I met through this man.
Yeah.
Because I was smart enough to talk to him that way in front of other people.
So smart.
Again, I always encourage people to take these tips, because it's not about being manipulative. It's not about being shysty. It's about getting your foot in the door and meeting people that are going to help you. And if you help them, they will help you. They have more power than you have. If they have more money, if they have more resources, if they have more fame, then these people are in a bigger position to help you. And if you help them, they will give back to you. I promise you.
Yeah. And I even think that more than the like giving back, just being surrounded by those people, like I feel like the benefit that I've had from being around you is just how much I learn from you, and like watching you do business and watching and picking up on your habits and things like that. Like that's probably the biggest return on my.
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot from being around you too.
Yeah.
I mean, feelings mutual, but we all need that.
Absolutely. And I think that the more successful people that I'm around, the more I see that everyone is actually helping each other, and like the people who aren't helping each other are usually at the bottom.
Oh, everyone at the top's collaborating. And it's funny because people ask me a lot. They're like, Nicole, do you ever feel used? Do you feel like people use you because you're always introducing them and you're always doing things? And at one point I did, but then I realized I'm not going to let a few bad apples stop me from being generous. I'm just going to cut them off from the resources. You know, feed the hand that feeds you.
So good. So good. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap on another episode of How to Be Famous with Whitney Uland. If you found today's episode helpful, then make sure to subscribe and leave me a review, or tag me on Instagram at Whitney Uland. And if you didn't enjoy the episode, then feel free to keep it to yourself, or go ahead and boost my SEO with your engagement. It's really up to you. And if you're ready to be the next big thing and you want to take things to the next level and work with me directly to become a self-made celebrity, then head to the link in the show notes where you can learn how to coach with me directly. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or gossip, then feel free to slide into my DMs. They're always open, and I love hearing your stories, celebrations, and wins. Until next time, I'm Whitney Uland, and this is How to Be Famous with Whitney Uland.